All right, we are back with another episode of Summer Showcase Northern Lights, talking about one of our favorite leagues to discuss, which is, of course, the CFL. I posted a question on Twitter and Facebook a moment ago, so if you guys want to start dropping your answers in the chat, we will definitely bring them up when we get to the subject. But before we get into all the topics tonight, Michael, how you doing tonight, man?
I am doing real well, man. I can't complain, bro. Like, excited to talk about a little CFL action that happened this past week and some fun topics tonight. And how are you?
I definitely can't complain either. Like you were kind of saying off camera, a little bit of a quiet weekend. Considering the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of news going on. So a little bit more of a straightforward show this time.
Yeah, I think it's going to lead to some really good conversation with the topics that we have. So
I definitely agree. And the first one at hand, which I really wanted to get your opinion on, did you see the news earlier on Twitter that the modernization of Edmonton's stadium has been approved?
yes, I did, and I think that that's great for uh, that franchise. And I believe that there is still rumors circulating that it new ownership hasn't been official, I don't think, but
Oh no, it's
they,
official.
was it official? Okay, all right, yeah. So new ownership is obviously going to dedicate and invest in the area. So that's awesome as far as um, that area is concerned, especially for that team. So
Definitely. I'm blanking his name at the moment, but I'll try and find it while we're talking. But
I, mu-
yeah,
I must have missed the official release. That's all. So
it was I don't want to say it was to little fanfare, but it was a little bit underwhelming in terms of the rollout on the new ownership. Uh, but I feel like eh, like changing ownership mid-season, there it's one of those situations where it's not really it's tough to really play that up while you're mid-season. You know what I mean? It's hard
yeah,
to make a big deal out of that and take away from the team while they're in season. But
right, exactly.
Larry Thompson took
Oh yeah,
over.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, ultimately that new stadium, the plans, the renderings of what they've kind of showed so far look interesting. Definitely excited to see that Edmonton's going to get a little bit of a stadium update, which will be really good for fans. I'm sure they're going to enjoy that when it comes out and comes to pass there. So glad to hear that has gotten approved. And honestly, I mean, maybe I missed it, but I didn't even know that was on the table for Edmonton. So it seems like a lot of positive changes are coming out of Edmonton really recently.
Definitely needed. That's for sure. Definitely a positive development. It's great for like I said, the fans in that area, and the team right now is, they're likely going to miss the playoffs, or they're going to be a low seed in the playoffs. However, um, they're in the midst of a pretty good run right now too. So the team has definitely improved over since letting go of Chris Jones. So they have some things to look forward to, without a doubt.
Absolutely. And honestly, it's been slightly surprising, at least in my opinion, how quickly they've been able to turn it around and find some success with Jarius Jackson as the head coach. And honestly, I mean, this is a topic that I didn't even think about discussing, but I mean, given the way that the team has performed since he's taken over, do you think he gets a shot at the full-time job moving forward?
I think he should. I mean, last year we saw a little bit of a turnaround when Trey Ford came in for Edmonton, but then it fizzled out. This hasn't fizzled out, and it's been without Trey Ford in the last few games, primarily because of injury. So um, it started with Trey Ford, and now the team itself is rallying around him. So I think he should absolutely, especially if they end up finding a way to make the playoffs. If they find a way of squeaking in to be one of the six seeds, one of the six teams in the playoffs, then I think you'd have to turn around and give him this, especially considering the disastrous start to the year.
I agree. I agree. Or maybe not necessarily just hand it to him, but at least make sure he's one of these strong candidates in the case. I mean, trying to find the exact week that he took over as the head coach, because honestly, it felt like so July 15th was the exact date Um, it took a couple weeks. They lost their first game, second game with him in the or sorry, they lost one game, went into a bye week, or no, sorry, lost two games, then started winning and have lost or won four out of the last five games. So I mean, honestly, a pretty impressive turnaround out of nowhere. And like you said, it hasn't just been because of Trey Ford, because obviously he's missed the last couple games, and they've been able to find some success with MBT there. So interesting to see how quick they made this turnaround, especially considering there really weren't many changes in terms of the coaching staff. I mean, you promote Jarius Jackson, you bring in, or you also promote G. Roy Simon, and then bring in the defensive line coach, and that's it. And
Yep.
essentially, things have turned around dramatically for them because it didn't look like they had a chance of winning a game prior to this.
Well, I will go even further, and I will say one thing about Chris Jones, and I think Chris Jones knows how to spot talent. I think he knows how to build the team. I think in this case, it's just he's not a very good head coach.
That's definitely fair. Definitely fair. I mean, honestly, it seems like so far he's found some success in Hamilton as well, which we'll get to in a moment. So, I mean, the case could be made that he's a decent defensive coordinator so far. And, obviously prior to his time as a head coach as well. But,
Uh,
sorry,
we'll,
go ahead.
we'll see about the coordinator side of things.
Well, I mean, so far, they've won a game. So, I mean, I guess that's a move in the right direction.
And still gave up 28 in the process.
Yeah, it's the CFL, man. There's a lot of points scored. I'll give him that much. But yeah, I mean, definitely, obviously, there's a lot of room for improvement in Hamilton across the board. And like you said, he definitely jury is out. We need to see the rest of the season before I can really crown him as a decent defensive coordinator. But he became a head coach for a reason. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's tough to take over midseason like he did, but he's ultimately playing with a bunch of players in a roster that had no say in and had no did not have his scheme in place. Not that he's necessarily tried to reinvent the wheel out there, but definitely encouraging to say the least that they've seen a little bit of progress at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same. Like you look at it from a standpoint of, um, you look at it from an NFL perspective. Like Brandon Staley was an absolutely terrible head coach, but was a pretty good defensive coordinator. You take a look at a guy like Josh McDaniels; he was a good offensive coordinator, terrible head coach. It's very possible that Chris Jones is a fantastic defensive coordinator and just a terrible head coach. That's all. I think I think he has a career in being a GM though, because I think he's assembled a pretty good, talented roster over there in Edmonton. So
That's definitely fair. And honestly, I would say that he's done a pretty good job of unearthing talent where other people won't necessarily look. Like what we've talked about a lot is the fact that he's got strong ties to the indoor football realm. Guys like Justin Rankins and Cordell Jackson, Leon O'Neal. Multiple other players over the past. Shannon Brooks was there for a while. All these guys that played in the IFL and had some success, he brings them up and really finds a role for him. So I mean, that's definitely something that I feel a lot of other teams could learn from. But at the same time, obviously, that there's an extent where you have to wonder if that focus on being a GM took anything away from him being a coach. So I mean, honestly, I could see a situation where he goes and transitions into a front office role long term as well.
yeah, it's almost like the opposite of the Bill Belichick situation, right? Like Bill Belichick was a terrible GM, but a great head coach. So it's very possible that Jones has a future in the front office. And for me, looking at the Edmonton team, you know, it it's weird to see a guy assemble a roster that he wants and then completely misuse it, right? So he has no one to blame but himself, like especially from the coaching perspective of the side of things. However, he still assembled a very good team, and they're producing now with a head coach that believes in them, and you can tell that they believe in their head coach. Um, so that's kind of been the turnaround for Edmonton, right? Like it's been a new head coach bringing in new blood, bringing in injecting a new enthusiasm to the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So these talented players are finally getting um, their chance and opportunity to shine.
Agreed. And it's like you said, it's one of those situations where it's kind of interesting to watch and actually see him, be that guy where he can build a roster, but he can't necessarily coach it, which is to me it never made sense, and it will never make sense, to be completely honest. But it'll be interesting to see. Dofu stream, found it yesterday. It's on an app. Okay. Thanks, Philly Mike. Appreciate that. We'll have to check that out. I assume that's some sort of free streaming service of some sort.
I've never heard of it. I have no clue.
Me neither. So I'll definitely have to check that out. Maybe that's where some games are available. Maybe we just got spammed. Although Philly Mike runs a channel as well, so definitely don't think that's a spam account. Any sports game.
Oh.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks for the information. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt.
Stream East took a wrong turn a couple days ago or a couple weeks ago, and they're slowly getting seized. Man, he's commenting like crazy now. Appreciate all the comments.
We'll take the comments for sure.
No doubt. But moving on to the next subject, couple big injuries, and then also one player that's available. Austin Mack just re-signed with the Montreal Alouettes like last week, the week before, and played for the first time last week. He is now moved to the 6-game injury list. And then you also have Gerald Braxton, an offensive lineman from the BC Lions, to miss a few weeks. Caleros is also going to be able to be available for this week. Whether or not he starts, they haven't said yet. But if he's available, I would assume he takes the first snaps for the team. What are your thoughts on Austin Mack already injured?
It's tough in this league because there's a lot of big hits because of the motion, like the high end motion, and then coming across the middle, you're running full speed at that point in time, and if you get just simple things like that. Not really sure what caused it. I didn't see the play, or at least I don't think it was specified to a certain play, so it may have been just a regular old game injury that's been nagging for him. But it kind of sucks for Montreal because he's such a dynamic threat, and he's so good at being able to open the field up, right, for Cody Fajardo, and take the pressure off everybody else around him. And him getting hurt is going to be I know that he hasn't been there because he just came back, but it's going to be a back to the prior adjustment on how to win this game without having that dynamic playmaker to really set the difference of this offense.
Now moving on to the loss of Braxton for BC. How big of a blow do you think this might be?
Well, I think any offensive lineman that gets hurt that is a starter or a rotational piece that's super in depth or comes in to be that tight end position or the extra lineman, whatever it may be, I think it's a blow to a league like this because offensive lineman is where it's so hard finding the best talent, right? Like finding really talented players. It's cornerback and offensive line that's the toughest. And anytime you suffer an injury like this down the stretch, and especially for a team like BC that's still trying to find its footing, considering all the hype coming into the year, it couldn't have come at a worse time for them, I feel like.
I completely agree. Like you said, they've kind of been slipping as of recently. I think they're 6-5 now, given the win against Ottawa this past weekend. But ultimately, they really haven't looked all that promising. There's been a couple different games this season that they've really kind of had it handed to them, and it's definitely a situation where I don't really think they could afford this loss at this point. But obviously we don't get to choose when injuries come, and that's definitely a situation where they probably wish this hadn't happened right now, but you just kind of roll with the punches and figure out a way to get around it for now. And hopefully you've got some solid depth there. I'm not exactly privy to who they have behind him, but definitely interested to see how they weather this storm going forward, and if it has a large effect after they just finally won a game in convincing fashion.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is like, you found your footing against Ottawa. Ottawa has been one of the tougher teams. I mean, they're not very good on the road. They're better at home, but they've been one of the tougher teams all year. And you go out and win 31-12. And, they put up a good game. They looked like the BC Lions that people were expecting. However, you lose a guy like this, and it could change a dynamic of a game. Like I was just watching the Kansas City Baltimore game before we came on, and Baltimore had three different combinations on the offensive line in the first half, and you could see there was a difference there. It's very similar to this situation. Like you're gonna see somebody come in and plug in, and if they don't live up to a certain spot, it's going to be another person that's going to have to step in, right? So hopefully they can find somebody. Hopefully they have some depth on the O line that they don't have to worry about it as much. But finding talent at this position is very hard, especially halfway through the year.
Definitely agreed. And speaking of finding talent, or not having to go find some talent, Winnipeg got some good news after Zach Collaros returned via, a pretty nasty hit, one that actually resulted in a fine. He ended up getting hit very high and left the game and let Chris Streveler finish out the game. And Chris looked decent. He ultimately eked out a win, but it was not necessarily the prettiest win in the world. Um, ultimately, what are your thoughts on the hit that ultimately knocked Collaros out, and then also, the fact that he's going to be available? If it's you, I mean, if you were the coach for Winnipeg, do you automatically start Collaros even if he's not 100%?
So as far as the hit is concerned, it's one of these situations where it's football, and um, sometimes these things happen. It's unfortunate. You never want to see it. The type of situation. Um, can't really attest, or we can only speculate on the intent behind the hit. But it's football. Things happen, right? Like we see it on a pretty consistent basis. Some people will probably call it a dirty play. Other people will probably be like, yeah, it's clean. Whatever it may be from a standpoint of whatever they look at it from, whatever lens they're looking at it through, right? Like, that's basically what it is. As far as the coach is concerned with Collaros, I think you make him available, but I think you start with Shrevler. If the game starts getting away from you, you put him in. He's been cleared to play. He's been cleared to be there, but take your chance to um, make sure that he's fully healthy, because even though the season hasn't gone the way that you are, you're right in the midst of, right in the middle, really, of a playoff push, right? So if you're Winnipeg, you need to make sure you're really sitting down and going, what's going to benefit me better? Him not being with us or him being with us down the stretch? So this is one game. They still have, several weeks left after this. I say, take a step back, let him sit out the week. If it really starts getting away from you, but it's close, like it starts feeling like the momentum's getting away from you, then maybe put him in to see if you can kind of rally around him and win the game.
Agreed. I mean, when you ultimately look at what Winnipeg's been able to do over the past basically 8 weeks, 9 weeks, they're 6-2 in their last 8 games. They had a bye week mixed in there as well. So I mean, you obviously you don't want to lose momentum here. So I mean, I could definitely see why you would want to keep Claros in. But if it risks your long-term success, do you really want to? Um, really kind of gamble with that, especially when this is a game that realistically you could lose it and it's not going to end your chances at a playoff push, especially with how everything has fallen in both divisions so far. There's definitely still an opening for Winnipeg to make the playoffs and ultimately probably do some damage in the playoffs if they make it. But this is a game that realistically, it might not be the worst game to trot out a Strevler. You're at home. You will have that advantage of the home field crowd. So maybe it's a situation where, yeah, you throw Streveler in and you kind of let him take the reins. And if, like you said, if the game starts to get away from you, you go ahead and put Claros in, but don't necessarily risk the chance for further injury, even though he has been physically cleared to play.
Yeah, it's a lot of comparisons tonight to the NFL for examples, but it's like the Jacksonville Jaguar situation last year, right? Trevor Lawrence was banged up, tried playing through it, played Superman ball, and they collapsed down the stretch and missed the playoffs. It's basically the same thing with Winnipeg right now. You're in the chance to get a playoff push, but you're not comfortable. It's not like you have a 7 game advantage over the the last spot in the playoffs or whatever. So you're right in the middle of this, so you have to think long term in this situation in comparison to this is a must win esque type of game. So I think you start Strevler if your defense can keep it close, but you feel like the momentum is starting to swing. Maybe bring him in to try to light a spark, but otherwise just let him sit on the sideline for the week.
Definitely agree. And I mean that basically the vast majority of the news this week. Like we said, kind of a quiet weekend. So we had a fun topic that we wanted to bring up, and like I said, I posted this on Facebook and Twitter, so you guys probably have a good idea what's coming. But I'm going to pose this question to you: which recent NFL cut, given that we just went through final cuts for the NFL and just started Week 1, which players that are not currently on a practice squad would you like to see in the CFL? And I mean, if you want to just give your, both players and kind of give us your good reasoning why you would want to see them, I'll give it to you first.
Well, I kind of cheated, and I did pick one that was going to be on a practice squad, and primarily I picked him because I don't know how long he's going to last on the practice squad because he is a little bit of a raw talent, and I feel like that it could go either one of two ways. If he does really well in the practice squad and he gets to a main roster, I don't think that he'll ever relinquish the spot. If he doesn't practice really well and he's expendable, basically. So I cheated a little bit on that, and I didn't give like a full fledged free agent. But the Carolina Panthers have a guy on the practice squad. He's a wide receiver. His name's Jalen Coker. He played at Holy Cross. He's 6'3". He's 213. He's got great size. He's a super raw talent because he didn't have the same, I don't think, the same coaching, whether it be Holy Cross or just through high school as well in Virginia. But he is a guy who has all the tools, and if he could put it together, he could be easily a guy who can make noise. Um, in the CFL for him, it's more of that Reggie Bagleton esque type receiver, right? The size that you can get over the middle of the field, the guys that make the tough catches, the ones that can make the contested catches. This is what Coker can provide, and I think that if he was able to go north, I believe that he would, without a doubt, carve out a role as a starter eventually, and be able to work his way into being a household name up there in the north. And it's just a matter of whether or not um, Carolina lets him go. But I would love to see him up there, and I think he could do it. So
Hey, that's an okay answer. I ironically originally picked somebody who is on Carolina's practice squad from a defensive player as well. Ironically, he was cut by the Eagles, Teron Jackson, a defensive lineman. He's fairly young. I think he was in the, Philadelphia for 2 seasons, was drafted in the 6th round a couple years ago. Kind of bounced around the bottom end of our roster, was on the practice squad for a couple seasons. And then ultimately ended up in Carolina. And he's a guy who maybe not the perfect athlete. I mean, he's like 6'2", 254, runs like a 4.7, put up like 20 some reps in the bench press. So I mean, he's got tools. He's just not the prototype that you want as a speed rusher in the NFL at this point. And I don't know that he's necessarily got the weight to really set the edge and play the run on defense full time. So, I mean, I think the CFO could definitely benefit him. But given that he is going to be on a practice squad, the other player that I really looked at in terms of defense was Deion Jones. And I know this is kind of wishful thinking, but he was just recently released by the Bills last season. He played here and there, but spent some time on the practice squad for, ironically, Carolina as well. So I would love to see him in the CFL. I think his body type, his skill set would really, really fit the CFL game well. I mean, he's got a lot of sideline to sideline speed. He's pretty good in coverage. He would be a guy that I really think would take to the game well.
The only thing that works against Dion is he's 29. It's a little bit of a tough sledding to be on that end of the spectrum and trying to make an adjustment to a pretty much a whole different style of football. Like I don't know how well he would be, and honestly, he has decent speed, but I feel like he's a liability in the passing game. So I think the middle of that field would still be fairly wide open. But I loved Deion Jones, when he first came into the league. So
I agree, and that's actually kind of why I would like to see him in the CFL because I mean he came out with a bang. He was doing a really good job in the first couple seasons. It looked like he was building towards being a great player in the NFL, and then over the past couple seasons, it kind of just fizzled out on him. And I mean, this is a guy who he ran a 4.38 as a linebacker. 222 pounds. That's insane, and it just kind of fits in my eyes in the CFL. And maybe if this happened a couple years ago it would make more sense. But he could be to the point where he's kind of aging out of the game as well. Did you have a defensive player?
I did, and I just found out he was signed to a practice squad. I did not know he was. I thought he was a complete free agent, but he's with the Houston Texans practice squad. And um, Jalen Coker is 22 years old. I forgot to mention that as well. So a lot of potential there. And I feel like the CFL needs to target guys like Coker, and really work on trying to get them in because the younger guys is what's going to build this league, to continually stay sustainable. And we saw a few guys that are, um, fairly, within a year or two, or even rookies that came out this year that are up there right now and they're kind of making some noise. So it's great for the CFL to have that. And I think more people need to look at that route. And I think Coker would be one of them. The guy that I'm looking at is a 25-year-old cornerback who was actually a first round pick. He was ninth overall. CJ Henderson. He just signed with the Houston Texas practice squad. However, he's still only 25. It's fizzled out in the NFL as far as the NFL is concerned, but he's 6'1, 204, and he has good speed, range, and size, which is something that is needed in the CFL. When you're talking about the way that the CFL runs its wide receivers with the high motion sets, you need a guy that can body a wide receiver at the line in a jam play, but you also need a guy who can run with him if he gets by him. And I feel like CJ Henderson could easily do that at that level. And I think it would also help him get his confidence back because Henderson's biggest issue, I think, has been his confidence because he's played on some pretty rough teams that were uh, not really well handled and coached. Basically, the 2020 to 2021 Jacksonville Jaguars. That whole situation was a nightmare. And then he was with Carolina for 2 years, 2021 to 2023. It's just those two franchises. The Jaguars have turned it around now, but those two franchises just weren't good situations. And I feel like Henderson lost his confidence, and I feel like the league as a whole just kind of looked at him and went, okay, well, we're just going to move on from it. So CJ Henderson, I think, would be a fantastic fit in the CFL level for various reasons. But primarily, I think I want to see him up there just so he can get his confidence back. Because even though he played at Florida and I can't stand the Gators, um, he was a nightmare to play against down there.
I like that answer a lot. I had not thought of him, but yeah, he would be a star in the CFL. Given that he could regain his confidence, which I assume he would up there. A little bit different game, and I think it would suit him well to go kind of be, get back to his roots where he was, a really quality player. Ironically, my offensive guy was another recent Bills cut as well, and that's Andy Isabella. Um, he he's a guy to me. He was a former second round pick in 2019. He did some good things early on in his career. Has a lot of speed, but he kind of, like we've been talking about these other players, has kind of fizzled out. 2021 he had one catch in 8 games. 2022, he played 5 games with 2 different teams, only had 3 touches. And then basically, in 2023, he played in 2 games, didn't really do anything. And then recently he was on a practice, on the bottom end of a roster and let go, and is sitting out there available right now. So, he was a guy that I think could do a lot of good things in the CFL, not only be a very quality receiver, but could also play in the kick return, punt return game as well. So definitely has a lot of value up there if he goes. And he's also a guy that I think is young enough that it really he hasn't aged out yet. He's still pretty old for CFL rookie status. He's 27, but I think that could be a situation where he could be one and done if he did go up to the CFL, which he could be a candidate for the UFL as well coming up here if he doesn't get signed the rest of the season.
The thing with Andy Isabella is his route running was one of the top notch in the class that year. The biggest issue for him was just understanding the intricacies of the step up in competition, right? Like the cornerbacks are much different. You're playing against the top 0.2% of all players in college, and Isabella came from UMass, if I'm correct. And I also don't think Isabella was used properly in Cliff Kingsbury's offense in Arizona, and then variously throughout wherever else he went. Like, I just don't think he was used in a very good offensive scheme. He, however, because of his route running ability, should have stuck around on a team. Like, plain and simple, he should have been able to stick on a team, and he actually has some pretty decent hands. My only concern about Isabella up north would be whether or not he could get that route running down, because it is a little bit different. Other than the fly patterns, which he's going to run by almost anybody because of how fast he is, it's the other smaller stuff along the sideline, over the middle. Would he be able to do that and work with it? Because it was what he struggled with, was those small little nuances at the NFL level. Could he adapt to a different style up north? But Isabella's a great pick because he reminds me so much of a faster Clark Barnes, who's having a lot of success in Calgary. So I think that he could, with the right scheme and the right offensive coordinator, for sure.
Yeah, what I like about him too is his background as a running back in college as well. Obviously originally recruited as a running back. I think he would fit a lot of these offenses that want to kind of use those wide receivers as an extension of the run game. Whether it's a couple jet sweeps throughout the year or whatever, that could be another valuable way of using him and getting the ball in his hands and hopefully getting him in space. Shout out to Jamal, who's tuning in, one of our biggest supporters, quite honestly.
I love that
make
guy.
sure you go subscribe to Athletes Forum and follow him on all your favorite social media apps. I know he's on Instagram and Twitter. I believe he's on Facebook as well, and obviously YouTube here. So go follow him everywhere. You won't be disappointed. Great content. Really, really in-depth when it comes to the ELF, the European League of Football. So if you're a fan of all things football, definitely want to follow him as well.
My unofficial producer on Summer Showcase
Yeah.
for the ELF.
Jamal, if you ever want to make that title official, buddy, I'm just saying, just shoot me a message. We can make that work.
He's my unofficial producer and stat guy.
That's true. Every time I'm in the comments, I see him dropping stats and kind of answering questions as you guys go and stuff. It's awesome. It's awesome to see. I need to be better about returning the favor to Jamal as well, and try and catch him when he's live. But I think most of his stuff is pre-recorded, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So definitely we'll have to try and return a favor somehow. Give him some access to live stream.
What's up, Jamal? Welcome to the Summer Showcase Northern Lights, the northern version. This is all CFL stuff that we're talking about up here. So
he's like, what's that? What's
that? A little bit different of game.
Just kidding. So real quick before we get into the game reviews, I'm going to go ahead and run a couple commercials, and we will be right back.
Winter is coming.
And he can make something magical happen here. And there goes the ball. It's going. It's going. You're a fan.
Battles will be won.
Go on now.
At the 30, and he
Who's going to take victory?
And that's what championship points matter.
It's time for war.
That's awesome. Jamal says Sherrod Baltimore, my former teammate, played a few years with the Red Blacks. He was on the roster earlier this season, my friend.
I was going to say, yeah.
Bounced on and off the active roster and ultimately was released, but it wouldn't shock me if they bring him back with the practice squad expansion. Interesting. He had a tryout with Hamilton way back in the day, but I'm learning as well. Interesting. All right.
Nice.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully we can kind of help you, learn a little bit. I mean, obviously we're not necessarily experts per se, but we sit here and talk about it every week, so we can pretend we are.
Yeah. I do that. I do that a lot, pretty often, is pretending that I'm actually good at anything. I don't know.
Make it till you make it, man. Fake it till you make it. No, I'm just kidding. So this is the blowout in BC this past weekend. Unfortunately, I picked Ottawa, so this is another loss on my pick'em record that I can't get off, unfortunately. But just a couple weeks ago, or last week, I think it was, Ottawa beat BC, and then BC came out and looked like a totally different team. Ottawa made a handful of mistakes that added up into some really big momentum shifts in the game, and ultimately watched themselves lose by 26 points. The biggest deficit I think they've lost by all year, if I'm not mistaken. So, man, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. I mean, what are your thoughts on this game, and did you expect Ottawa to lose by this much?
One item of news that we missed: Raquel Armstead was cut.
He was cut?
He was released.
I definitely missed that.
Yeah,
Wow.
Armstead was released. He is not with Ottawa anymore. I don't remember who they have bringing in, but I mentioned it in the chat that Armstead was released. They signed somebody, though.
Wow.
Yeah. I think this game led to it. I don't know. I really can't blame him for it, because, I mean, he was still the best rusher out of the whole game, but he was let go.
That is insanity. I totally missed that. I've been kind of out of the loop recently. Dealt with some Jamal Morrow.
Yeah, that's right. Jamal Morrow he was with Saskatchewan, I think, last. Was it? Did Saskatchewan last? Maybe. Yeah, but Morrow was the guy that they signed in his place. Yeah.
Saskatchewan. You're right.
It was Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of didn't really think about that, but he had 907 rushing yards last year.
Yep.
Played 16 games, 202 carries. Seems like a decent receiver. Did some kickoff returns as well, so definitely a valuable guy. But man, I'd be curious to hear more about why they decided to release Raquel. I mean, dude's been kind of carrying the offense this season, but I did notice at the end of this game, he was removed for Anthony Gosselin. And I know it was short yardage, kind of game clock killing situations, but it's not like Armstead's not a back that can do that. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's 220 plus. So I thought that was kind of
with
interesting.
good speed too.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I'd almost kind of wonder if there isn't something behind the scenes there. I mean, this is the third or fourth team that Armstead's been cut from since he left the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe only the second, now that I think about it, because he was in DC and was released by them from the the XFL, and then ended up with Ottawa's practice squad last year. I think was there for a little bit. I think got released and then came back this season, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, a lot of people also don't realize that Raquel almost died twice in 2020. So
Really?
Yeah, he got COVID and got really, 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 really sick. And they put him on the little COVID exempt list, and then he came back and got COVID a second time, and it almost killed him even further the second time. So, yeah, he almost died. Like
Wow.
twice. Yeah. So I cheer for him a lot. I hope that he gets picked up by somebody, but I completely forgot about that. But yeah, Raquel got released for Jamal Morrow. As far as the game is concerned, BC just Nathan Rourke is starting to get comfortable again, which we all expected would probably happen. William Steinback, Stanback is still being William Stanback despite being 44 years old or however old he is. And this receiving core is one of the better. And when you start adding Stanback as your leading receiver, and then you get Eberhardt, who came up with some pretty clutch plays down the stretch, it's a very dangerous offense when you start getting that many guys rolling. Because Alexander Hollins, Alexander Hollins was basically completely obsolete in this game, and still they put up, a huge amount of yardage. What was it? He passed for 325, I think. So, yeah, I mean, like when you start getting those other guys involved with McGinnis and Hollins, and you don't have to rely on Hollins, it's going to be a good game for you.
Agreed. And this is kind of what we expected to see out of Stanback, when he signed with BC in the first place. That's why everybody's been picking them as Grey Cup favorites. You take a run game and you add it to an already potent offense, and it should realistically make them better. And in this game, it did. So, I mean, this is definitely encouraging for if you're a BC fan going forward. Hopefully they can keep their run game rolling. But, I mean, ultimately, you look at what he did in the screen game as well. 6 receptions for 7 to 8 yards, had 69 yards after the catch. I mean, he essentially put up, almost 200 yards of offense in this game. And, ultimately, I think that's the formula for BC to continue finding success. When you can have some sort of balance in that offense and get Stanback some momentum, the BC is going to be a really, really tough team to beat if they can continue that going forward. But that's a big question mark given the fact that they really haven't found that much success in that particular, phase of the game so far.
Yep. And, this Ottawa defense has been, this team's been anchored by their defense for a majority of their season, but on the road they've been terrible, and this game was not any different. The first half was god awful, horrendous for Ottawa. This game was over basically at half. I mean, it was 31-6. So the fact that they came out and held BC to 7 points in the second half was huge, but they need to get help with Justin Hardy. Eli Stove is starting to look like he might roll into that, but I'm kind of looking at Nick Mardner, right? Like, he was your first round pick.
Yeah.
Like, you got to find a way to get him involved. Dominique Rhymes is a little bit older. He's a reliable vet, but you can't run an offense through him anymore. You got to run this offense through Hardy, and Mardner and Stove right now. You got to find a way to get those three to be the primary guys in this situation. If they can get Mardner involved, Ottawa should be a dangerous team down the stretch. It's just whether or not they can do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, we saw kind of a preview of what he can be, last week when he had 3 receptions, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But it has been few and far between. I mean, he really hasn't necessarily gotten it as involved as I was expecting, when we saw him penciled in as a starter, early on in the season after, realistically not doing as much as I would have expected in the preseason. So, I mean, it's interesting to see. But another interesting side note from this game that I wanted to touch on real quick before we move on is this was like the most I've ever seen fullbacks involved in a CFL game. I mean, you got Marco Dubois and Anthony Goslin, who both had rather decent roles with Ottawa. Goslin got 4 touches, Dubois had 1. And then you look at the BC side, they had David Mackey get a couple carries. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't recall a recent game that had that much fullback involvement, but I'm kind of weird. I like fullbacks for some reason, so it piqued my interest, and I thought it was kind of entertaining, to be honest.
Oh, I want to give a shout out to Andre Miller too for Ottawa. That's my boy from Maine.
There you go.
6'2", 224, great size. Good, decent speed. He was a baller down here in Maine. Black Bears roll out, Jamal, right? If you're still with us. But yeah, Andre Miller, hopefully he can get involved too. It was nice seeing him out there. So
agreed. And he's a guy that Bob Dice mentioned before the season is it very rather impressive in training camp, and then got a late injury, and they had to let him go, and then they brought him back. Fullbacks are almost going to be gone from the game. Athletes Forum says,
Oh
and
yeah.
Old Town Maine, he says.
Yep. Old Town Maine.
But yeah, I would like to see Andre Miller more involved. I'm not really sure if it continues to happen. It all depends on the situation with the wide receiver. I mean, you look at the past couple weeks, they've lost a lot of guys to injury. Khalil Pimpleton, Braylon Addison, Jalen Acklin, all on the 6-game injured list. They brought in Rashid Bailey. When does he start playing? I think it's probably this week against his former team, Toronto. So that's another factor in here as well. And then how are you going to work in Bailey and Win? And if that's the case, I mean, he's probably taking snaps from Miller, especially after the performance Stove just had.
Yeah, and that's going to be the biggest thing is what are they going to do once they get these guys back? Obviously, Acklin is going to be a key possession guy for this team and has been for a while. And then, all the other injuries that they've had, Khalil Pimpleton looked like he was starting to be a little more of the explosive guy. What are they going to be able to do, moving forward from that standpoint? So I'm very interested. I hope Andre Miller just sticks. It was just nice to see him out there playing. So.
Agreed. And he's the guy that I'm encouraged by. I want to see more of him going down the stretch, but he's got to continue to perform and hopefully perform a little bit better than he did in this past game. So moving on, we talked about it a little bit before, with the injury to Zach Claros. Winnipeg wins a close game after Chris Streveler enters the game late, plays fairly well in place of Claros, and actually scores his 9th and 10th touchdown on the season overall. So given that we talked about it before, Winnipeg's won 6 of their last 8 games. Are they a team that you're looking to at this point to be in that Grey Cup contention once again this season?
Grey Cup contention, not sure. They need to keep this receiving core healthy. And they need to keep Caleros healthy too, but they have the talent. Lucky Whitehead's there and he's barely being used or barely being, run through. So he's basically become just a special teams guy, which is not how I think you should use Lucky Whitehead. So they have the team. They have the coaching staff. They have the talent every year to be able to be a Grey Cup contender. It's just right now I'm not comfortable putting them there. Shout out to Saskatchewan in this game, though, because they were down pretty big at halftime, and they fought like we have been seeing all year with them, and clawed their way back in the second half to force this to be almost an overtime game. So shout out to them. Shout out to the head coach over there that's been, doing amazing things as well. And it's just the breaks haven't gone their way down this stretch, but it's been a lot of close games, and they were on the right side at the beginning of the year, and now they're on the wrong side of it towards the middle of the year. So maybe it will be like the Breakers, and it will break their way down the stretch. So Winnipeg, though, has the talent. They have the veteran leadership, and they definitely could do it with the head coach that they got in Mike O'Shea. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, as long as he's there, they're going to be in contention, especially if they still have Caleros. But I mean, honestly, I think that they probably could have rolled out with Streveler as the starter and still been in the same situation that we find them in right now. I really don't think it would have changed much, other than we would have seen, a more run-heavy offense in terms of the quarterback run. But ultimately, I think this was an impressive win for a lot of reasons by Winnipeg. Obviously, Saskatchewan has kind of slipped as of late. But I mean, anytime you score 33 points, you like to think that your defense as the Rough Riders will be able to slow down any other offense enough to the point where you win that game. And that just wasn't the case in this situation. They did have some big plays. Obviously, you see there that Caleros threw an interception. But ultimately, they just allowed points at the wrong times, and it added up to, a 2-point victory by Winnipeg. a couple different plays go their way, and all of a sudden this is a Saskatchewan win. I mean, you look right there. Trevor Harris played a hell of a game. 368 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, ran for another. Averaged 6.8 per carry and 7.5 per pass. That's a fairly impressive offensive showing for a quarterback, especially of his age. And he spread the ball around really well. You'll see here he had 4 different receivers with 60-plus yards, and they were all wideouts. So, I mean, that's impressive to say the least. And if you can keep that going, I have to think Saskatchewan finds some wins down the stretch and finds their way into the playoffs. But it is kind of crazy to see like the ebbs and flows of the CFL season. Winnipeg started off really slow. They're kind of hitting their momentum, hitting their stride. Saskatchewan's going the opposite direction. Edmonton started slow, starting to hit their stride. So very interesting. Hopefully this doesn't play out in, against my favor, and Ottawa doesn't start a slide right now. But that's kind of par for the course on how the CFL season's going so far this year.
Yeah, and I fully suspect that Saskatchewan's going to find a way to, have one of these close games fall on the right side for them, and once they do, they might get a little hot again. They got to get Sean Bain involved again. I know Keyshawn Johnson has been really, really surprising. Like, let's face it. I mean, he's been one of the more surprising wide receivers in the league this year, with some of the things that he's done to help Saskatchewan out during, this time period. But this offense runs through Bain and Emilus, and if you don't have them involved, or if they're being shut down in any capacity, it makes it very hard to continue to move them, because their run game is kind of missing, right? That's the biggest thing for Saskatchewan right now, is they don't really have much of a run game. If they can figure that out, though, I feel like these close games will start falling on their side again. I do think they'll get into the playoffs. They just need to get hot at the right time so they can, go blazing into the playoffs.
Definitely would agree. I mean, obviously, you throw the ball 49 times, you only carry it 16, and 4 of those are, runs by your quarterback, and a few of those were not design runs at that point. So, I mean, that's a lot of passing and not a lot of running. So that's definitely something they need to work on going forward, and I think it will only benefit this offense. But moving on to the next game at hand, another very close victory, a 3-point victory by Hamilton. What are your thoughts on this one? I mean, obviously, Hamilton's been kind of a doormat for most of the season. They've been really kind of slipped as of late. I think they've only won 1 game prior to this, but all of a sudden they're kind of finding some momentum.
Yeah, I'm just more surprised at the outcome. I don't think Hamilton's going to make the playoffs. I don't think they have the strong enough team across the board to make the playoffs. But with Chad Kelly back, I don't know if it's just been one of those situations where it's kind of like the Nathan Rourke situation, but he went 24 for 30 for 322. So it's not like he had a poor game. It's not like he needed to really feel like he needed to run into it or work his way into it. Hamilton just had a really good game plan, and they came out hot. They smacked Toronto in the mouth, and then they just had to hold on. And that's pretty much all that they needed to do. And they did it. Toronto just never seemed to find their footing after that first quarter. And sometimes when that happens, it falls apart. Hamilton's found a gem in Greg Bell. I feel like he's going to be a guy who's going to be a vocal point for this run game here, for years to come, to be honest with you. And Tim White had a huge game finally without dropping a ton of balls. So that was good. But yeah, Hamilton just hasn't, I don't think they have enough overall to really make any noise or late push, but this was a little bit surprising with Chad Kelly's return.
Agreed. I mean, I don't think that we've necessarily gotten the game out of Chad Kelly that we expected, when he returned. But granted, he's been off the field for a while. One thing that kind of piqued my curiosity in this game is we finally got to see Tagovailoa. Wow, take some snaps there. Got a couple carries and a touchdown, and threw a pass as well. I'm kind of curious to see if we continue to see him involved. I mean, Obviously, Bo Levi Mitchell is not the long-term answer there. He's, I want to say 36, 37 years old. Maybe I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but he's definitely closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning of his career. So you want to get somebody in there that you can kind of start developing as your future. And I think Tagovailoa can be that guy.
Yeah, Bo Levi's 34, so you weren't that far off. Yeah, I mean, really, realistically speaking, Talia, was, I think, the Big Ten all-time leading passer. I know he played like 7 years of college football though, or something like that. He was around for a while. Um, and his brother plays really well. It's just we don't really know what he is. Like, he went to Maryland, and Maryland was just one of those teams that you didn't really see a ton of. So we don't really know what we're getting with him. I know that he is mobile. I know that he does not need to rely on his rushing, per se. But yeah, I mean, you take a look at those stats. Three 3,000-yard seasons at Maryland. All time. Big Ten. I think all time Big Ten leading career passer, maybe, or something like that. So 11,000 yards in college. 67% completion percentage, so that's a pretty solid, completion percentage. He just played with some teams that, weren't fully well built. 3 straight 7-win seasons. Consistency. That's really what he is. What is that? 77 to 37. So roughly a 2-to-1, 2.5 to 1, roughly ratio. So yeah, I mean, it's not terrible at all. It's just a matter of will he be the future, really?
Agreed. And I kind of, honestly, I think if he continues to see snaps, we're going to kind of eventually see that transition, whether or not, Bo Levi Mitchell is ready to usurp the starting job or not. I think it's probably time that they start looking another direction, given that the season is pretty much lost at this point.
Yeah.
Like you said, Big Ten all-time leading passer. For a reason. Obviously, you see he had 3 fairly productive years there. And realistically, he was fairly young in 2020 when he didn't have a good year. Played semi-decent with Alabama, although, obviously you would like to see more snaps there. But they've got some talent down there in Alabama. So obviously he didn't see the field a whole lot. That's why you have the transfer portal in the first place for guys like this.
Right.
So, definitely would love to see more of him in the CFL. I definitely think we could have an interesting situation where, he could be a guy that could play himself into an NFL role, given enough playing time and given, the right success.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm Hamilton, I'm definitely looking at trying to lock him up to be the future of the franchise. That way you don't have to scramble for when Bo Levi does decide he wants to retire.
I would completely agree. And, if I could sit here and give Talia any advice, is, hey man, don't undersell the ability to be a starter in the CFL versus, a back end of the roster guy who might end up being released and back in the CFL in the future. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, we just watched Nathan Rourke do the same thing. But, if you go and you play for, say, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, and you really ball out, you might have a better chance of finding a lasting home in the NFL. So I would say, if you're going to do this, be very, very picky about what opportunities you take to leave the CFL.
Just stay in the CFL, build your brand.
Yeah, which is, honestly, that's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like, you're not going to get notoriety. You've already got a name brand. So, I mean, why not go be a star and continue to build on that rather than, hoping and praying for an opportunity somewhere else?
Yep.
So moving on to the last game of this past Labor Day weekend, can Edmonton keep it going? I mean, ultimately they found another victory this week, and it was actually a convincing one at that. Ultimately won by 15 points. McLeod Bethel Thompson, impressive performance in this one. 486 yards passing. I think he led the league this week. Javon Leake had a little bit more quiet week. but that's probably partially due to the fact that Kevin Brown is now back in the lineup as well. And then, man, Tevin Jones, what a performance! Wow.
Not even just Evan Jones, Curly Gittins, Eugene, Geno Lewis. Like, this Calgary secondary is one of the we've talked about it a couple times about it being the weakest part of this team, and Edmonton exposed it. The only thing that worries me about Edmonton and whether or not they're going to be able to keep it going is their lack of a run game. Like, Javon Leake had a couple really, had a couple good weeks there, but overall, when this team has hit the field, it's been about an 89-11 split between pass and run, and I don't think that's sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable at all, and honestly, that's a definite concern. I wonder if Montreal saw this performance by him and was like, "Huh, maybe we made a mistake there." But
Well, it's hard because it came against the Calgary secondary, so I mean,
that's true, and also, I mean, obviously, it's hard to argue against any of the wide receivers that Montreal has on the roster. Obviously, not only do they have Austin Mack, who just came back, but they have a couple other guys that are very impressive. The Philpott, Tyson Philpott,
yeah.
and then other several different guys. I'm blanking some names at the moment, but ultimately this was a game where obviously Edmonton's defense played just as well as their offense. 4 interceptions, couple sacks, great performance overall for the team, and it's encouraging. Whatever they're doing there with Jarius Jackson now in charge, they need to keep it going because they've obviously found some success. It'll be interesting to see if they can make a late season push going forward and continue to make that chase for the playoffs.
Yeah, and they'll need to because they had some catching up to do. But good start for them so far, or a good turnaround for them recently, and they get Calgary again this week. So Jake Mayer is going to have to play better. Period.
Agreed. I mean, do you think we see more of Logan Bonner going forward, or was this just a situation where the game was out of hand and they wanted to get
Yeah, I think this was just a situation where the game was out of hand because, Meyer, Edmonton did a great job of rattling Meyer early. And I think with them rattling him as early as they did, it really kind of threw him out of rhythm and he never really got back into it. They didn't really run the ball. So it's hard to get your quarterback back into rhythm if you can't run the ball, and they were unable to do that. So, Clark Barnes wasn't really a factor in this. They had some new faces in Kylan Hill and Ishmael Hyman kind of make decent appearances. It's been basically Bagleton and Philpott, week in and week out with Barnes. So, they'll find balance. They'll get some rhythm in here, and once they do, I think it will be all right. It's not going to be pretty right now. A lot of injuries and stuff that are kind of messing with these teams this late in the year.
Absolutely. I mean, Kylan Hill just a couple weeks ago was on Ottawa's practice squad, so to see him come out and all of a sudden, be basically the bell cow for Calgary is not only surprising. I mean, it's kind of an indication of what's going on there in terms of injuries. And something that they're going to have to focus on going forward because obviously that's hard to sustain. You can't run the ball 8 times for a net of 17 yards on the day. Sorry, 18 yards. That's unreal. I mean, you're literally setting Jake Mayer up for failure at that point. I mean, you can't even blame him for the interceptions. The defense knew all that's all they were getting was passing game all day.
It's easier to disguise coverages than it is blitzes.
Agreed. Definitely agree. And, anytime you don't really have to send the house to get pressure, that helps as well. So, I mean, you obviously had a couple sacks there. So, man, I mean, Calgary's got some things to figure out. I was kind of encouraged by what they did this offseason and kind of hoping that they would be able to find some success, but it hasn't really panned out overall for them so far. So, it'll be interesting to see how everything finishes up for Mayer and if he ultimately ultimately walks back in as the starter, unquestioned starter in 2025.
I don't know if it will necessarily be an unquestioned starter, but I definitely think that he'll have the upper hand to be the starter.
I agree. I honestly think you kind of have to give him that much. I mean, you've already invested this much time and effort in him. So why wouldn't you, kind of see it out at least for this season and, if not into next season, but probably would say try and bring in some competition, more of a veteran guy or at least a high profile rookie that you feel really good about and can kind of throw in and win, lose, or draw with him, and know that there's some sort of development going on there.
Yeah, they'll definitely need to for sure. Just because it's the way, it's the best way to get the best out of people, right? Like, is competition.
Completely agree. Completely agree. You let somebody be complacent in football, and chances are you're not going to get the best out of them. We're going to run a couple commercials, and then we'll come back for our betting segment, and then also our predictions, and then we'll put a nice tidy bow on this one, and see you guys back here next Wednesday, hopefully, assuming my work schedule permits. Yeah, we will be back for another episode next Wednesday. But before we leave you, stay tuned for our predictions.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school.
Oh, wow.
This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I used to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
I'm just saying, I don't think Jesus actually buys chocolate, milk, and donuts at your local grocery store. So, just saying.
How do you
Other
know?
than that,
How do you know? Are you friends with him?
no. But if he did, I bet you he would be using Upside. Just saying.
Yeah, he definitely would be, for sure.
Check that out. Make sure you sign up for your Upside. And if you do, use our code, get a little extra bonus on your initial purchase. And same thing with Current. If you're looking for a new banking app or, just a bank in general, great app. I strongly recommend it. I use it myself. Obviously, it's the official bank of Shady Sports. So if you're looking for it, definitely give it a shot. Jamal says, I spoke with him. He's not a big chocolate guy. Good to know. Good to know.
Good to know. Yeah.
You would definitely know better than I would. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
But moving into our betting and prediction segment, brought to you by Bet US, another sponsor of ours. The link for that should be in the description as well. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, if you're watching on Twitter, jump over to YouTube, hit that link for us. But we've got BC at Montreal. Montreal, given that they're the home team, is a negative, a 3.5 point favorite. Then you got BC, who's a 3.5 point underdog in this one. What are your thoughts, predictions on this game?
I'm taking Montreal in this game against the spread as well, and the over.
The over, okay, interesting.
Yeah. I think this game's going to be pretty high scoring. I think Montreal wins this game 35-27.
Okay. I could definitely see that. That's 62 points?
Yeah, BC's on a roll right now. I think Nathan Rourke's getting it back into the flow of things. Montreal is coming off a bye week. They still have one of the better teams, but with Austin Mack going down, who's going to step up to be able to open up the field for them, especially against this questionable BC defense? So I still think Montreal will score some points just because they have a good team. It's just who's going to step up and make the play, and I think BC has enough to outrun Montreal.
I think that's a fair assessment. I'm actually going to go the same direction. I've actually got them hitting the under, but only just slightly. So I've got a 30 to 18 score. I just think Montreal is way too complete of a team for BC to compete with currently. And until they show us otherwise, I have no reason to pick them over Montreal, which is, in my opinion, the best team in the league right now. And obviously the standings back that up currently. So if you are going to be betting on that game, we both take Montreal, and those are our scores. So moving on to the next game at hand, we have the Toronto Argonauts at the Ottawa Red Blacks, and this is essentially a pick'em. And this is probably as accurate of a spread as you could get this weekend, because either one of these teams could win or lose this game, and it really wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I'm taking Toronto. I know Ottawa's really good at home, and it's very hard to pick against them when they're at home, but I think last week you're starting to see a lot of those injuries kind of rear their ugly head for Ottawa. They made a running back change heading into the week, which was a little surprising considering I don't think Reichwell was the problem. So Chad Kelly's eventually just going to continue to get into his role, get into his confidence, and rebuild all that he lost during his time gone. I think they hit the under though in this one. I'm taking Toronto 27-20.
Interesting. I'm actually going to pick Ottawa. I don't mean to be a homer in this one, but as I mentioned, as you just mentioned, they are undefeated at home this year. The one game they did not win was a tie against the Saskatchewan a couple weeks ago, 22-22. So I mean, until they lose a game at home, much like I said last week, I'm going to keep picking them. So last week I said I was going to keep picking them until they give me a reason not to. They gave me a reason not to, but now they're at home, so I'm going to go with that.
And then they're going to give you a reason not to this week too.
Hey, they might, honestly, especially with the depth concerns at wide receiver and a running back change, which, like you just said, Reichwell was not the problem. If anything, it was the lack of touches he got at certain points in time that was the problem. I just something stinks about that situation. There's a reason he was let go, and I wonder if he wasn't a little too vocal off the field, but who knows? I'll have to look into that a little bit. But I like I said, I pick Ottawa. I think Ottawa is going to win this one, but it's going to be a really close game. Like I said, the spread is pretty apt. It wouldn't shock me if this game comes down to a field goal. And I actually have this one as a 21-17 game. I know that's kind of an odd score given this is the CFL and there's all kinds of weird ways to score. But I really think that this one's going to be a low scoring game, and we are going to see Ottawa eke out a victory and hopefully get some guys back healthy next week and find some momentum. Next game, Saskatchewan versus Winnipeg in Winnipeg. Winnipeg is the favorite, given they're the home team as well. These odds seem a little close, but after last week, it's not surprising.
Yeah, this is a game that very I'm trying to find the right term here. That basically could be the turning point for Saskatchewan, right? It could be very, very close to going either way, right? Saskatchewan could win this game. It could be a 3-point victory. Winnipeg could win this game. It could be a 3-point victory. It's going to be a tone setter for the rest of the year for Saskatchewan. And Winnipeg is a wild card, right? They're hot right now, but we don't really know what we're getting with them. I'm taking Saskatchewan as Shrevler starts and plays. I know it seems like a little bit of a cop out considering Collaros is healthy. But I'm going to take Saskatchewan to win by 3 in this game and the under 26-23 if Shrevler plays the whole game.
Okay. It's definitely fair, especially if it's that close. I don't think they're going to, panic and put Claros in or anything if he's not 100%. And, like we talked about earlier, there's really no reason to start Caleros in this game in particular. I believe you got a bye coming up fairly quickly. So if you can kind of rest him, it might be best for his long-term health. But I'm going with Winnipeg in this one. Given that they're at home, I feel like they have a little bit better chance of winning this game, even if, Claros does end up sitting. I think Strevler gives you more than enough on offense in order to win this one. And ultimately, like I said, I'm gonna take Winnipeg, but do ultimately expect this to be another close game, although not quite as close as last week. But I do expect it to be a lower scoring game than last week. I do not anticipate seeing 68 points scored in this one. So Winnipeg's defense is going to need to step up, as is their run game. If they can do that, then they're going to find another victory in this one. But I've got it 24 to, let's go 19.
Okay.
A weird number. Picking way too regular scores. Last game at hand is your Calgary Stampeders at the Edmonton Elks after they just lost by 15 points. Can they rebound this week?
No. Edmonton wins this one again. I hope Calgary does, but I just don't see it yet. I just want Mayer to play better. That's really all I care about in this one. I'm taking the over. I think Edmonton has hit the over in a majority of their games this year. Calgary secondary is god-awful horrendous, and it's not going to get any better. So I'm taking Edmonton 32, Calgary 23.
Okay. Just barely in the over, but definitely expect that to be an over game as well. And I think you're right. I think they've hit the over in most of their games this season. They've scored a lot of high point, they've had a lot of high point shootouts. So I definitely think Edmonton is going to win this game as well. Obviously they just won in Calgary by 15 points. Why would you bet against them at home the very next week? And I do think this is going to be a high scoring game. I expect them to score over 40 points. I'm going to put it at 41-29. Wow. Very, very over in this one, in my opinion. Edmonton's been pretty high powered on offense the last few games. So hopefully they can continue that. And hopefully, Jarius Jackson, former Denver Bronco, continues to find some success and gets that head coaching job.
Yeah, for sure. Just wanted to give an update for anybody that is up there and cares. The Baltimore Ravens just scored a touchdown with like 10 seconds left in the game, and they're going for 2 apparently to try to beat Kansas City. So if anybody cares. Yeah.
Interesting. I care. I picked Kansas City in that one.
And they well, wait a second. Apparently the touchdown did not count, and Kansas City won 27-20. So I'm not sure what just happened there, but
all right.
Yep, it was weird. My updates came. So Kansas City won 27-20. I'm assuming the turnover must have got turnover. Yep, it did. He got overturned. So
damn. Well, congratulations, yep. KC. We will see what happens tomorrow. And we'll see if Philly can win against Green Bay in Brazil. So, I mean, if you want to catch some international football, I believe that game's on Peacock, if I'm not mistaken. It was said earlier. Any final thoughts for everybody watching before we get out here?
Yeah, I know that was an NFL update. I apologize. It's just opening night. I'm sure there's a lot of people that watch both the NFL and CFL, so I wanted to mention it. As far as the CFL is concerned, I think that we're seeing the heat up for the playoff push here. Hamilton, I think, is probably the only team that you could probably safely scratch off that list. Other than that, it's pretty much a run for those, second through 5 or second through 6 spots in the league. So definitely getting into the exciting times in the home stretch here, gearing up for it. Do not be surprised that if some of my picks are wrong. Basically, I'm looking at Saskatchewan. I picked them, so don't be surprised if they do lose to Winnipeg. And I'm going to be honest, and don't be surprised if Calgary beats Edmonton too this week. Not saying that they're going to, but I think that there's some urgency that's going to start popping up for some of those teams, and those are the two teams that need it the most. I'll probably go 1-1 there, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I have a feeling another 2-2, 3-1 weeks in my future. We'll see who exactly loses this week. It's very possible. It's very possible. A lot of injury attrition there, but we'll see how things go. Ultimately, thank you everybody for watching. I know this not quite as many viewers as we're used to, but that's okay. We pushed it back a night, and I did not schedule it ahead of time, so I apologize about that. We have, utilized some new things going forward, so I'm thinking that that should help a little bit of the scheduling aspect of things. But if you are a fan of the CFL, make sure you tune in with us next Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, live right here, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, or Instagram, depending on where you want to catch it. So we try to come to you and make it as easy as possible to watch this sort of stuff. But yeah, ultimately, appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you tune in the rest of the week. We've got plenty of great content coming at you. Got some stuff tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday, and then we'll be right back into a full week next week. So with that thought, we'll leave you guys with a quick promo video, and we will catch you next week.